she's going to hire somebody in the hopes that this person can run advertising and do web and all these kinds of things. And I think, well, that's a good approach to it, but there are no unicorns. So be careful who you hire, be careful of the vendor you choose, and be careful of the volunteer that you're going to lean on.
Welcome to episode number 184 of the Missional Marketing Podcast. I'm Bart Blair, joined by the CEO of Missional Marketing, Mr. Jason Hamrock. Good day, Jason.
Good day, Bart. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to join you. We've been doing this for years now,
man.
like over 6 years. Over 6 years we've been producing this podcast. Wow. Our goal is to help churches grow by leveraging digital marketing and effective communications so that churches can reach more people. Ultimately, that's our heart. We know that's the heart of the local church. And we hope that this content that we're creating is helpful to someone somewhere. I'm confident that it is.
Yeah. We want to bring refreshing ideas to your plate so that you, church, can run with it and let the Lord speak into what you're doing in your job. So thanks for listening in.
Yeah, and we want to come at this too from the standpoint of being practitioners. Jason has had a season in ministry over about a dozen years as a communications director in a church. I have been a pastor and a church planter and have managed communications in multiple churches. And so, although I've never been in a communications director role, I've done a lot of communications. And so we try to come at this as if it's, hey, if we were sitting in your seat, these are the questions we'd be asking. These are the things that we'd be prioritizing, and we want to help you there. Now, Jason, before we get into content of today's episode, I don't know if you noticed this. We were on a staff meeting earlier today. No one said anything to me about it when we were on our leadership team meeting, and you haven't said anything yet. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, you might notice that I have this great big wound on my head. Did you see this?
I did, but I didn't want to ask.
Okay, all right. So for sake of full disclosure, I was playing golf a few days ago, and I got paired up with a guy who really didn't play much golf. You play a little bit of golf. I play a little bit of golf. One thing that's different about golf in Texas versus golf in Arizona is that our golf courses have lots of trees. Yours have like sand and cactuses things like that. We have lots and lots of trees. The guy that I was playing golf with, and if you're listening to this podcast and you're not a golfer, this won't make any sense to you. But if you are a golfer, you will totally understand. The guy that I was playing golf with wasn't a very experienced golfer. And on the first tee, he hit his first ball into the woods and it was lost. And on the second tee, he hit his ball into the woods and it was lost. And I looked at him and I said, I hope you brought a lot of golf balls today. And he said, well, I only brought 3. So when you've lost 2 out of your 3 golf balls in the first 2 holes out of 18, you know you're in trouble. I mean, I think most of us would probably, carry a dozen
at least
foul balls in the bottom of the bag because you know you're going to lose some. So after he lost the second golf ball, I was like, this could be a problem. So the next hole, he hits a ball into the trees. And this time I decided we're going to have to go and find it. Or at least I'm going to have to go find some golf balls in the woods here. So I was traipsing through the bush trying to find this guy's golf ball. And I ducked to go under a tree branch. And I didn't duck far enough.
Oh, and it got you.
And a tree branch got me in the head. Now, it looks worse than it actually is. It didn't actually... I had a hat on, and really what happened was the tree branch caught the hat and it kind of pulled my hat back. And you know how when you have an embroidered logo or emblem on the front of the hat, you always have like a little patch on the inside. It's like the patch on the inside of the hat scraped the top of my bald head. So anyway, it looks worse than it is. But anyway, if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, you have no idea what it looks like. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, please avert your eyes because it looks kind of gross. I don't want you to be grossed out. Anyway, I just want to get the elephant in the room called out. It's a golfing injury. I came home. My wife's like, "What happened?" I said, "I got hit in the head with a golf ball." She's like, "Really?" I said, "No, a tree." And we both. The tree is still standing, and I am still standing. So we'll call it a draw. No one won or lost that battle. But anyway, okay, all right. That's enough for the senseless banter at the top of this podcast episode. We have a really, I think, different conversation, something we haven't really discussed much on this podcast in the 6 years we've been doing this. And that is, we're going to have a discussion today about when and how churches need to prioritize the communications work that they're doing, whether they're using volunteers or using vendors. When does it make sense for you as a communications leader? Like, listen, we know a lot of the churches that we work with, you're like a one-person shop. You get like one person, or maybe you've got you and one part-time
Yeah.
person. Like this is very common.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about raising up volunteers to help in the communications department when you don't have a full staff. But how do you balance that with when you can actually look outside and hire a vendor? Sometimes it makes sense to empower volunteers to get involved in the ministry. Sometimes, for the sake of simplicity or expediency, it might make sense to look outside and hire an outside source as a fractional staff, or a specific service that you need to outsource. So, with that being sort of the topic of the conversation today, Jason, if you were sitting in a role where you're a one-person shop, maybe you're the lead pastor, you don't have a communications team, or maybe you're a one-person communications department. How do you start to prioritize the work that you're doing and start asking the question, how much of this could be done by volunteers, and what might I need to outsource? How would you prioritize the work there?
Yeah, well, I actually think it doesn't. You might be one person, you might have four people. It's still a relevant question. And when I was a comm director of my church, which was a megachurch, we were always being challenged by our leadership. Use volunteers, get volunteers engaged. It's a lot easier on the ministry side to get volunteers, especially kids ministry. You need volunteers. But in the communications or the operations side, it gets a little bit more challenging, mainly because there's a level of excellence that we want to have in everything we do. And sometimes those people exist in our church and other times they don't. And the ones that don't have that gifting, but they have the gift of they want to serve, we have to ask ourselves the question, do we engage that person and lower our standards or lower our expectations because we want to hand it off in a good way to a servant leader? And so those are things I had to wrestle with, because there are some things I was not going to give up. I wasn't going to have somebody. Back in the day, we used to do bulletins and our lead pastor had an outline and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't going to ask a halfway decent proofreader to proofread that, because I had a zero error expectation thrusted upon me. We will not have typos in this thing. So that had to require me finding the expert. And I was fortunate to have a couple of those people who were week in and week out would do that for us. And so, but then I had others that I loved them, but they didn't have the giftedness of web development or social media, but they wanted to. So I had to realize, okay, what do I need to outsource? Or hire somebody, because sometimes we just want to throw money at, say, well, I'm going to hire the next person. Well, I just dealt with that with the church. She's going to hire somebody in the hopes that this person can run advertising and do web and all these kinds of things. And I think, well, that's a good approach to it, but there are no unicorns. So be careful who you hire, be careful of the vendor you choose, and be careful of the volunteer that you're going to lean on. And so I think this is such a good topic, because I think all of us, depending on, it doesn't matter size of church. You could be a small church or a mega church. You could have no money or a ton of money. You could have one staff person or 6 staff people. You have to approach this to be a good steward. And that's a key to all this. You've got to be a good steward of the resources that people through the Lord have given to your church. And that might be people and it might be money. So regardless, you got to be a good steward. And I think, we put together this just strategy of, okay, what kind of things do you go through? What kind of things do you ask? And so, yeah, I love this topic, because it's one that we struggle with on the operations side, because we think, well, we'll just go hire that out. Well, that isn't always the best situation. I mean, you and I both know churches that hired a talented young person, and within a couple of years, they went and chased more money. Well, you can't fault them for that. I mean, they're wanting to move up and improve their status with their income, and they got a family and all that kind of stuff. But that happens all the time in our space. So you and I talk with churches all the time, and it's a revolving door of comms departments. And so, yeah, I think that, you listed out here, which is, I'm really excited to go through. There's 6 different strategies or steps to walk through when it comes to deciding, do you use a volunteer or a vendor?
Yeah. So the first one on here, I'll kind of set the table for it, and you can kind of deep dive into it. Is really just start with paint a very complete picture of everything that you want and need accomplished from a communication standpoint. So I'd start by take out a Google sheet and make a list of all the stuff that has to happen every week, every month, every year from an internal communication standpoint, and then make a list of all the things that you want and need to get done from an external communications standpoint. So internal is your ring one, people who are already connected to your church. The external is you trying to connect with ring 2 and ring 3 people, which are people who are in your community who are looking for a church or looking for some sort of help. I would also include all the stuff that you ought to be doing that you're not yet doing. Like, this is a regular conversation that you and I have with churches all the time, is we'll have a meeting with one of our churches and we'll say, here's 2 or 3 things that you really need to be doing from a social media standpoint, or from an SEO standpoint, or from a digital marketing standpoint. And then the person looks at us and goes, well, that's great. I just don't have the bandwidth to take that on. But that doesn't mean you don't put it on the list. Put it on the list.
Yeah.
And then once you put all that stuff on the list, all the stuff you're doing, all the stuff you need to be doing, then you can start to prioritize it in a way that allows you to say, hey, this is the beginning point of what do I need to do? What do I need to find another person or another source to take that on? What comments or thoughts do you have on that, Jason?
Yeah, I do this with especially new comm directors. Now, that doesn't mean you're 23 or 24 years old out of college. You could be a 40-year-old. You're new to the position. Mm-hmm. What I encourage everybody to do, especially the new ones, is to actually map out the next 5 years. What do you want your department to look like in 5 years from now? So you have what you got now, which, again, like you said earlier, Bart, you might just be a one-person shop. You might have an extra person. You might have some vendors that you work with. Great. What does it look like today? And then what does it look like 5 years from now? And the ways I tell them to do that is I go, you got to lead up. You got to lead up. And I've said that because I started with, in order for you to, I don't want to go too off the trail here, but in order for you to really make a massive impact in your community, the people in your city, and invite them to church and let them know you exist as a church, you need one of 2 things. You need passionate people who are going to go and bring their friends to church. That's plan A, right? And we know this. Word of mouth, invite my neighbors, invite my coworkers. That's plan A. That goes back to the first century Christians, right? But to supplement that, you need money. You need advertising dollars. And you're a small business, and it kind of floors people when I say you really should be allocating 3 to 5% of your overall giving towards digital outreach. And they're going, wait, they're doing the math on how much giving they get in a given year, and they're doing the math. And I'm going, I'm a fraction of that. I go, exactly, because you haven't painted a picture to your leadership of, here's where I want to be 5 years from now, not only in staffing, but also in budget, because I could see the ROI I could paint that out, how many people we can reach and how many more people would get into our church and how many people we can save and baptize and all that kind of stuff. So I always say, paint that picture. It is what it is today. What do you want to be 5 years from now? And what are you doing to reach those goals? You're not just going to leap there. You're going to have to build it. It took me, when I started, it was just me. And I had kind of a sort of a part-time person who spent a little time with me, another part-time person. And it was just, we're talking a big honking church. And over time, I was able to add more salaries because I was able to present why I needed this person. And I slowly got there. And I was there for a long time. And it was an uphill battle, but it was worth it because we moved the needle a lot in those years and we were growing like crazy. So yeah, I'd like your idea of start with the complete picture, list everything.
Yeah, list everything and then ruthlessly prioritize it. There are some things that, because Sunday is coming, it has to get done every single week.
Yes.
And then there are those other things that are kind of like, nice to have, but not necessarily need to have. If I could do more of this, I would do more of this. But and we all know what, some of those things are when you look at your own list of priorities. And then, the next phase that I would kind of go through is the personal self-assessment, especially if you're a one-person department. What can you actually do really well? What's your skill set? Many times when I'm on a call with a comms director, especially if they're new in their role, one of the first questions that I ask them are, what are the top 3 or 4 or 5 unique giftings that you have that make you the proper person to be in this chair? And that question often catches them off guard. But a lot of times it's their creativity level, or sometimes it's because of their ability to plan and organize. Yep. Sometimes it's their own communication skills. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should be the one doing this. This is those of us who are in leadership in any organization, and you and I probably fall victim of this a lot. There are a lot of things that we can do, but it doesn't mean because we can do it that we should be doing it. We have other people on our team. We need to empower others or get others involved. Sometimes those things that we're good at are less critical than others. So it might be easier to get someone else to do it. One of the things you and I are really big into the 6 Types of Working Genius from Patrick Lencioni. One of the things that you need to ask yourself is, what are the things that actually energize you in your role versus the things that drain you? And so if you're working genius, if you're wired like Jason Hamrock, you're all wonder and invention. Yep. And Jason doesn't love to live in spreadsheets and the minutia and the details of things. He loves the wonder and invention, the ideation, the creativity side of things. And it's better for Jason to have someone on his team that can actually manage the minutia. Or maybe you're a person who loves the minutia. You love checking the boxes. You love organizing the Asana or the Monday platform so that everything looks good and everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, but you're not as strong on the front end, the creative side of things. As you begin to prioritize the things that you want done and the things that you need to get done, I would look at your own skill set and go, hey, what am I great at and what gives me the most energy? And that's really, especially if you're looking at either empowering volunteers or outsourcing some of that work, take on the things that you know you're going to be most gifted at and the things that are going to give you the most energy.
Yeah. So let me add a little extra nugget of gold to that. Okay. You were chosen. You were chosen. You were sitting in the seat because somebody on the staff of the church decided to go with you. They chose you. Congratulations. Right? You might have been the comm director for 20 years or 2 months. Regardless, you're it. What I'm always encouraging our people to do, when I say our people, our comms people to do, is what you just said, Bart, was perfect. Understand your strengths and your weaknesses and go have a conversation. Go have a conversation with your lead pastor, asking your lead pastor, what matters? What are your expectations of me in this team, this department? What kind of goals do I need to realign with to make sure I'm helping to achieve your vision and your goals for our church? And maybe that starts with your executive pastor, but I would absolutely have that with your lead pastor, because you want to be in sync with what leadership is saying. This is a priority for us. And why you want to do that is you're going, oh, okay, now that I understand that, I need to be able to realign my strengths around that goal. I also need to understand these are my weaknesses. And if I do these things, I'm going to burn out. And I need help with this. And a good, solid leader will understand that and go, all right, thank you for being honest and bringing that to our attention. Let's solve that problem. Well, the only way you do that, guys, is if you have the conversation. I talk to too many comm directors where they hardly ever meet. They sit in a weekly meeting with maybe the leadership team. I hope you're at least part of that, right? Listening, but you're not having those regulars defined. They could be quarterly or something like that, but having those regular meetings with your leadership, with your lead pastor about what the prioritization looks like. Because it's got to, if you're not aligned with that, you're going upstream. And you don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be fighting that. So that's free coaching right there. And if you want to learn more about that, I mean, you got two people, myself and Bart. We've got years of experience talking to literally thousands of churches combined over the last decade, giving this kind of advice. So if you want to have a deeper conversation about that, just reach out, because it matters. It really, really matters. And there's more to it than just what I just shared with you. But
yeah. Okay, so we've gone through this process. Let's assume fast forward a couple of weeks, right? I've spent all this time. I put together my Google sheet.
Yep.
I've got my internal communication list. I've got my external communication list. I've prioritized those things in order of mission critical, the things that are most important to moving the needle in our ministry. I've evaluated which things I'm most gifted at, things I'm most passionate about, the things that give me the most energy. I've gotten sort of a green light from my leadership team to say, yeah, this is how we want to prioritize your time. Now, when we start looking at all the stuff that's left over that I know I can't do, I have two choices, Jason. I can either go look for volunteers in the seats that might be able to come and help me out, or I can go and I can look for a vendor, some sort of company or agency that can help me out in the area that I need help in. How do I decide which of these things I should empower volunteers to do? How do I decide which ones I need to outsource to another agency or a vendor to?
Man, that's such a hard question, because every culture is different. Every church has different people that have gifts and talents. But just because you've got somebody sitting in your seat who runs an ad agency doesn't mean that they're going to want to volunteer all their time. And so I think you've got to, when you have that list, and it boils down to, what is something, when I think about using a volunteer, is this a one-time thing, or is this an ongoing every weekly thing? If it's a one-time thing, I think that's a lot more accomplishable. Hey, we want to meet one time for this, it's our 50th anniversary and it's next year, and we want to have a really great, big, huge party. Yeah, that would be fun to get some of the, hey, if you're in the marketing space, we really want your creativity. Come join us to be on this committee for a season. Versus, I've got to have somebody who's posting on social media week in and week out, being strategic and knowing what they're doing and how they're doing it. I would be really careful about having a volunteer do that. If that's all you've got, well, then there's a different strategy to work with those volunteers. But some things like that require an ongoing, it requires a skill set, expertise, and time, and it's every week, then I would really be looking at hard of going, we need to either hire internally for that. Maybe it's a part-time person that is in our church that could give us 10 hours a week, and you pay them. You don't ask them to do it for free. They'll burn out. They won't last. It's a rare person who can do that. They're either retired, or they're maybe a stay-at-home mom or dad, right? But those people are rare. I would probably insist that you get some budget to hire that out, and it might just be something that's going to be small for a little while, or it's just because you say, "Oh, I want to have a robust social media." I mean, you teach on this part. The key to that is just have a plan, work the plan. You say this all the time. Have a plan, work the plan. Maybe it's once or twice a week. That's all you're doing in social media. You want to grow to like 5 times a week, but that's going to take time and money. So I think I probably put the two lists together and go, what can I have a volunteer doing? No, it's only a one-time thing, or there's low commitment, something that somebody's not going to bail on me. Now I'm going to be left holding the bag. Or we have to do this well every single week. There's no days off. Those are the kind of things that either, if you're going to do them, you either want to outsource that to a vendor, or perhaps a contract employee that can give you like a few hours or 5 hours a week at a certain price. And then maybe you build it into a full-time position eventually.
Yeah, I like you started, the first thing that you talked about was like one-off events, right? One-time things. And those things come up all the time. And having people who are in sort of your bag of tricks, who have certain skills and abilities that you can ask to participate on a one-time thing. I think, there are some things that it's just impossible to outsource. And we have this conversation with churches a lot. It's impossible for you to outsource the photography for your weekend worship services, right? I mean, it's not impossible, but it's more practical for you to have somebody who's a part of your church who's already going to be there on a regular basis. Community engagement, community events and activities that you're doing, service projects. If you want people chronicling those things, shooting video, shooting photos, it just often makes more sense to have an internal volunteer doing those things. I would say the number one thing when I am evaluating volunteers versus outsourcing is going to typically be related to flexibility with timeline. If I have hard deadlines, hard timelines that have to be met, and there is no flexibility here, I'm probably going to outsource that.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when you're working with volunteers, you have to have a little bit more gray area, and it's a little harder to hold volunteers to that high level of accountability that you need to when you have a hard deadline. So let's say, for instance, you're doing a financial stewardship campaign, and you need a booklet put together that promotes all the details on that. And you happen to have a volunteer in your church who's an expert in InDesign. They know how to do it, and they can do the layout. They can do it for you. If you bring them in as a volunteer, sometimes the level of response that you get, and of course this is going to vary from volunteer to volunteer. If they don't make the deadline, what are the consequences if they don't make the deadline? Yeah. Whereas if you outsource that project to a vendor who you're paying to get it done, what are the consequences if they fail? Well, they lose your business. There's a consequence to that. It's harder to have hard conversations about competency and deadlines with a volunteer than it is someone that you're hiring. I hired you, you're an expert, you promised to deliver a certain time frame, and if you fail to deliver, then I'm forced to have a hard conversation with you. It's easier for me to break up with a vendor than it is for me to break up with a volunteer.
Yeah, well, there's
some
ownership.
sort of consequences there.
If you pay me, even if it's a little bit of money, and at my church, and you're going to pay me some money because I'm an expert in this area, and you're going to pay me to do it, then I'm going to get it done. Versus if I'm volunteering my time, it's not if something else in my life pops up, guess what I'm doing? I'm taking care of that over this project.
Yeah.
And I'm copping out going, hey, sending a text, I can't make it. Hey, because you don't really own it. And again, it's a level, it's kind of like a level thing. So for example, I pick up signs. This is my job at Sun Valley where I go. I pick up signs that are A-frame signs on the corners of the streets every Sunday afternoon.
That's your ministry, huh?
That's one of my ministries. And Carrie Powell, the gal that I love, Carrie, she doesn't care when I get it done. It just they need to be picked up before Monday morning. So it could be in the middle of the night on Sunday night, or it could be like 1:00 in the afternoon. She doesn't care, but she knows that I'm going to get it done. And I have a window of time, and it's picking up signs. So I text her when I'm done with it, like I just done, or I text her, hey, I'm going to be out, right? That kind of, I mean, it's low. I don't have to think. I just got to drive my truck around and pick up signs. It's not very difficult, but I don't just space and forget it, right? I hold myself accountable to something like that, even though it's very low. Now, if the church wanted me to run a capital campaign kind of a thing, and it was a huge commitment and it's a big, big deal, and they're asking me to volunteer my time with that, I'm going to be a little more reluctant to say yes to that. And the church really should not do that to me, because you're asking for somebody to give hours and hours of their expertise. That deserves a wage. And the reason why it deserves a wage is because now I own it. I'm responsible. The church has entrusted in me to get this job done. So you got to really be careful with that, because like you just said, if it's easier to break up with a vendor who you'll probably never see again versus a volunteer. And if you lean on that volunteer, I'd recommend you almost pay that volunteer. That way, if it doesn't even work out, it's like, well, we gave it a shot. We paid you some money, so no hard feelings. Versus, yeah, you didn't even do your job you said you would do. You're basically saying, go find another church.
Well, I have some very strong feelings about that. We don't have time to deep dive on this, but I'll tell you this. another area, another time that you would probably want to consider outsourcing versus volunteers is if you're talking about a very specialized skill set.
Yes,
So
right.
I used the example of an expert in InDesign, someone who's a graphic designer, someone who's an After Effects designer, someone who can build
They're pro.
Google, somebody who's an expert in Google, knows how to build Google ads, or as an SEO expert. When you start getting into some of these special skills, more often than not, you're going to need to hire a vendor or outsource those types of things. But this is a personal thing, and not everyone is going to agree with this, but I am typically not inclined, even if someone is an expert in my church, to hire someone in my church to do work for my church. And the reason for that is if it doesn't go well, it can negatively affect the relationship. So here's a silly example. Years and years ago, I'm talking probably 15 years ago at least. Probably close to 20 years ago. My wife and I actually hired, I was pastor on staff at church, and we hired some men from our church who did home renovation work to come and do some flooring work in our house. And after the first day, we realized it was not going to work out. They weren't delivering in the way that we expected them to. And it was one of the most challenging things to actually go and actually fire people who were part of my church family from a job that I had hired them to do. Now, I didn't hire them to do a job for the church. I hired them to do a job personally, but I would view it the same way. If I hire someone in my church, even if they're an expert in something, and it doesn't go well, the relationship is always going to have a weirdness factor to it. And again, I've never been like, your church there when you were on staff at Central was, thousands and thousands of people. And oftentimes, if you were going to hire somebody, you might be like 12 degrees of separation relationally from that person that you're hiring. When you're in a smaller church of 200 or 300 or 400 people, and you're hiring someone from within the church to do a job, and it doesn't get done the way it needs to get done, and you have to kind of terminate that relationship, it does create some awkwardness there. And so I'm less inclined to hire people inside the church. Now, hiring people for staff is different, right? Because you're hiring somebody in an ongoing role, but one-off projects or things like that, I tend to shy away from.
Well, it kind of depends. I mean, you want to do your due diligence. Just because they're friends doesn't mean they get the job. Right. I mean, I'm thinking of a church that we're building their website, and the lady who hired us to build the website was a servant leader. Well, she got hired, her firm got hired to come up with a new logo for the church and the school. Did a fantastic job. And she goes, "We're not cheap." And the church recognized, but they're like, "Well, she's going to do a great job because she's got a really reputable firm, that they did their due diligence." So I think it all depends on, you don't just blindly go, "Oh,
like I said, it's a personal thing for me, just on one bad experience. And my wife and I said, yeah, we won't ever do that again. Okay. We got to keep moving because we're already kind of at the end of our time, but we still have a couple more points that I want to kind of hit on here.
Yeah.
When it comes to bringing in volunteers, and again, we have always been advocates for empowering people in your communications ministry as volunteers.
Yeah.
But there is one thing that we have very seldom ever talked about, and that is that a free volunteer will often cost you your time.
Yes.
And you do need to do the hard calculation of what your time is worth, because leading volunteers simply takes more time. Why don't you speak to that just a little bit, Jason?
Well, unless you're working for free, which you're not, you have an hourly rate. So the question is, in everything you do, are you being a good steward? I mean, you could be working on your own website. Great. Well, that's going to require a lot of hours because we build church websites. So now you're choosing to spend your time building that website versus going, you know what? I can outsource that to somebody else who's an expert in building websites, but nobody can do the job that I can only do with some of the things that I can only, because I'm in this space inside the church. Same thing with leading volunteers. If you're going to lead volunteers, it's going to cost you. You have to invest in that. And that's totally fine. Just understand what you're walking into, because there's an hourly rate that you're being paid. And so it's just not free. Well, volunteer's free. No, because it's got a lot of extra tentacles to it. Like you said, if it goes south, that's a rough conversation to have, right? And then people who are disgruntled will tell lots of people. So you got to be really
Well,
careful.
here's the deal, Jason. If it goes south and it still needs to get done, or you have to do it all over again, it just costs you twice as much time as
It doubled
why you're going to end up doing it twice instead of
over
having it
time.
done once the first time,
Or
right?
you're going to be doing it at home on your own time. You don't want to do that because you
Right.
got a family. So we all understand that's a situation right there. So calculating your hours, and sometimes it's just a matter of going, okay, it might just make more sense to outsource this to an expert who's going to get it done. We know it's going to get done right. It's actually going to cost us less, right? Usually it's less than it would be your time to manage a volunteer, or that would be equal, right? Or hiring somebody's going to be a lot more expensive than just outsourcing it to a vendor who specializes in that area.
Well, even if it doesn't cost you less, you at least have a fixed cost to it, and you know going in what it's actually going to cost
that's
you,
good.
right? And if you're working with a vendor who can't give you a cost or a really, really solid estimate, then you should go talk to a different vendor,
vendor.
right? We've all probably had those contract situations where they give you a range. Well, it could cost you somewhere between $200 and $2,000. Like, oh, I'm sorry, but that's a bit too much of a range for me. But I think sometimes paying for help, even if it costs more, is better stewardship than trying to DIY things and finding yourself circling back around and having to redo projects or missing deadlines or whatever the costs end up being. And we've all been there. We've all been in those types of situations.
Totally.
The last point in this, Jason, is okay. If I'm the comms director, I've made my list. I've prioritized things. I've recognized I've got a few things that I can probably empower some volunteers to do. In fact, I might even have in mind some of those volunteers could be, but I still have a few things on my list that I really need to get done.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to ask for some money from my leadership team to get this done, whether that's running ads or some SEO work or building or renovating a website. How do I go to my leadership team and present my case?
Well, I said it earlier. When you walk in with a plan, you're going to be well respected and you're going to be taken seriously. If you walk in empty-handed going, I can't get all this stuff done, I need help. Now you're just needy and you're not coming with a vision. And if I was a lead pastor, I'd be like, all right, thanks. This meeting's over with. Go back to your office and figure out what you need to come back to me with a plan. You're wasting my time. So I would do that exercise. And then I really love what you said here. You got to frame it as an investment, not an expense. I want to invest in this. And why? We want more people following Jesus. We want more people sitting in our seats. We want more people in small groups. We want more of what you're telling me, leadership, is the goals of our church and this organization. And so it's got to be painted as, I want to invest in this. And so, you don't go from, well, I have $5,000 budget to I want $500,000. Be a little realistic, So have a good game plan. Like, I want to get to $200,000, and they're going, this is nuts. But hey, I have big vision here. But you're going to say, but right now, what I really need is I need an extra $5,000. And here's what I would do. I'm making that up. It's whatever it's going to be. This is what I'm going to do with those $5,000. This is how I'm going to be a good steward. And this is the ROI I'm hoping to expect from this investment. Words matter, and posture really, really matters, and preparedness really, really matters. And you have some wisdom you'd probably throw in there too.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, especially depending on what the specific work is that you're looking to outsource. This is probably a passion point for us at Missional Marketing and Church Communications Group, is that when churches come to us and they ask us to take on either one-time projects or ongoing work for them, we are firm believers in being able to provide really effective reporting in terms of the work that we've done and the impact that it's made.
Yeah.
Because I've been emailing back and forth with a gal at one of our church partners in Michigan. They're not a big church. They're a few hundred people. She's a volunteer, works directly with the senior pastor. She's putting together a report for their board for basically the first 6 months of the year to show how their marketing efforts have made an impact in their church year over year. So I've been working with her back and forth to put together some charts and some data so that she can go before the board to justify the money that they've spent and hopefully ask for some more money in the next budget cycle so that they can continue to move the needle and to do more and to spend more on their digital outreach, their digital marketing. And like, we're really big on that. So if you're going to any kind of vendor, especially if it's like a marketing or an SEO related type of thing. I mean, there's certain things that you're going to outsource, like, hey, maybe it's hiring somebody to do your sermon video bumpers, right? Well, the proof is in what they produce for you, right? Or maybe you're looking for somebody to just schedule and post your social media. The proof is, well, they did what they said they were going to do. Yep. But there are some things that you do need to have a little bit more proof in the ROI on. And so just make sure that whoever you're outsourcing to already has a plan in place to be able to provide regular reporting and data for you so that you can justify those expenses that you have.
Yeah, that's good. Everything you're saying there is spot on. When in doubt, either reach out to Bart or myself or use ChatGPT. Regardless, you got to walk in with a plan. Don't walk in empty-handed and say, I need help. Just nobody wants to hear from that person. They want to hear from somebody who's got a vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to wrap this up. This is hey, we're trucking towards the 200th episode. We've promised that we're going to hit the 200th episode. I don't know that any of our audience really cares, but you and I do. We do. So we're trucking towards episode number 200. For those of you who made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you're a regular listener, we really do appreciate you hanging in with us over all the years. We've watched the download metrics of this podcast just slowly inch up over the years, and same on our YouTube channel. We love you out there. If you find this content to be helpful, if you would, please leave us a rating or review wherever you listen to the podcast. Share it with another ministry colleague or somebody else that you know who might find it to be helppful. And again, as Jason has mentioned several times, if there's ever anything that we can do for you, please let us know. I will give one more little shout out here to any of you who might be interested in meeting with us in person. In September, we're hosting a conference, the Church Communications Conference in Kansas City. Jason, what are the dates? Do you remember them off the top of your head?
23rd, 24th, and 25th. Go to churchcommunications.com.
Yeah, churchcommunications.com. As of the time of this recording, there is still an early bird special. I don't know if the early bird special will still be out there, but hey, get in there, get registered, show up in Kansas City. Many of our team members will be there. We're going to do some deep dive on a lot of different things that will really help you and your church be more effective at leveraging digital marketing and communications to reach more people for Jesus. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.